Hey guys, tonight we're tackling one of the biggest historical mysteries that absolutely nobody asked for, but everyone can relate to on a deeply personal digestive level. Why were medieval people always constipated? Forget kings, castles, or the occasional dragon. Tonight is about the real struggle, medieval bowel movements, or, more accurately, the lack thereof. Before you tuck in, please like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this kind of historical nonsense. In the comments, let me know if you're listening from the bathroom, because, let's be honest, that's where this story hits hardest. Dim those lights, set your fan to soothing medieval windstorm, and slip into something comfortable. This episode will be best enjoyed in stretchy pants. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to go a week without fiber? To wrestle with a toiletless world where your best option is a splintery wooden bucket and a hope that nobody's watching? Have you asked yourself what happens when your only vegetables are boiled beyond recognition, or when your bread could double as building material? What did people do when the only thing moving in their bodies was regret? And why is every medieval painting of a nobleman's face just a little bit pained? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1372. There's no bathroom, no coffee, and your gut is already quietly plotting your demise. Welcome to the Middle Ages. Your breakfast options are either a crust of bread hard enough to file your nails, or a scoop of something called pottage, that's basically beige sadness in a bowl. Your entire digestive system sighs in anticipation. Let's be honest, the modern world is obsessed with what you eat. There are entire aisles in the grocery store just for fiber, yogurt with live cultures, and boxes cheerfully announcing they will keep things moving. In the Middle Ages, breakfast didn't keep anything moving except your jaw. And that only if you had the teeth for it. For you, the word variety means, is this bread rye or barley? And is this pottage yesterday's or last week's? Either way, it all tastes like a medieval dare. Let's focus on the bread. Every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner revolves around it. Not the good, squishy, gluten-fueled loaf you're picturing, but a dark, heavy, suspiciously brick-like round of rye or barley that could survive a siege and still be used to patch a roof. If you're a peasant, your bread is often stretched with acorns, beans, or whatever you can find to make it go further, meaning it's less farm to table and more whatever fell into the grinder. On a lucky day, there might be a hint of last year's harvest. On a less lucky day, it doubles as a makeshift doorstop. Next to your bread, the pottage. This is the catch-all stew that simmers over the communal fire for days, sometimes weeks. The recipe is simple. Take water, add any vegetables that aren't rotten yet, throw in some grains if you're lucky, and let time do the rest. By the time it's ladled into your bowl, pottage has seen more sunrises than you have. Occasionally a bit of kale or a carrot will make a cameo appearance, but mostly it's an edible reminder that colour wasn't invented until the Renaissance. You shovel down your breakfast with the determination of someone who knows they won't see another meal until dusk. There's no coffee, no orange juice, and certainly no smoothie with kale and chia seeds. Water is suspicious at best, so you sip a weak ale, a thin, low-alcohol beverage designed to hydrate without killing you, but also without moving anything through your system except regret. Even children drink the stuff. It's not refreshing, but at least it won't give you dysentery until lunchtime. If you're lucky enough to have access to an egg or a piece of cheese, you savor it like a rare gem. But here's the catch. Cheese, especially the hard, aged type, only adds to the ongoing saga of your internal stasis. Medieval life is full of little ironies like this. Anything that could actually help you go is either out of season, prohibitively expensive, or reserved for saints' feast days. Fresh fruit? Only when the village orchard overproduces. Beans or lentils? Maybe, but you better hope your body remembers how to handle them. Meanwhile, your noble neighbours up at the manor house are having their own issues. Their breakfast table is groaning with roasted meats, cheese, white bread. The good stuff, sifted and soft. And maybe some preserved fruit. But all that rich food just means their digestive system has joined yours in a kind of medieval standoff. Everyone's blocked, everyone's uncomfortable, and nobody wants to talk about it. Social status doesn't make the system work any better. It just means you're constipated in fancier surroundings. The best part? There's no escape. There's no secret health guru, no influencer touting the wonders of bran. You eat what you have, when you have it, and you hope that maybe, just maybe, today's crusty bread will come with a side of divine intervention. If not, there's always tomorrow's pottage, aged another day for complexity and for your digestive misery. In medieval times, "you are what you eat" was less advice and more a grim warning. And you, my friend, are bread, pottage, and hope on hold. Let's talk about bread, your main food group. Medieval bread was so dense and low in fibre, it could be used as a blunt weapon or possibly the first proto-laxative warning sign. Imagine biting into a loaf so sturdy it could double as a self-defense tool. That's not an exaggeration, that's just breakfast. For most of medieval Europe, bread wasn't just food, it was survival. It filled the belly and unfortunately did very little else. If you're hoping for the rustic charm of fresh baguettes or soft sourdough, abandon all hope. This bread is a dark, squat disc, somewhere between historically accurate and agricultural accident. Your typical loaf is made with rye, barley, or whatever grain didn't get eaten by rats, damp, or the neighbour's goats. Wheat, the good stuff, was reserved for the rich, what the medieval world called manchet bread. For everyone else, it was maslin, a mix of whatever you could scrape together. The result? A crumb so compact, it challenges your dental insurance and your digestive system at the same time. Every bite is an arm workout. The crust is less delicate golden flake and more the medieval solution to home security. Stale after just a day, it could, in emergencies, be soaked in broth to soften it, a trick known as sop. But let's be real. Even a nice long soak turns your bread into the culinary equivalent of a wet doormat. Fibre, you might ask? Not in this house. Because medieval milling methods were rudimentary at best, the bran was often sifted out to make flour stretch further or to create a nicer crumb for the occasional noble. But for peasants, the bran sometimes ended up in the animal feed instead. You're left with a loaf that is, against all logic, both heavy and unhelpful. Your intestines file a formal complaint. And just to keep things lively, in bad years, bread could be bulked up with pretty much anything: peas, beans, chestnuts, and yes, seriously, ground up tree bark, or, if you're feeling fancy, clay. These creative additions did wonders for not starving, but even less for regularity. Sometimes the bread would pick up a fungus called ergot, which could lead to seizures, hallucinations, and in extreme cases, death. So your choices are risk blockage or risk bread that fights back. By noon, your jaw aches, your stomach is suspiciously quiet, and you're already plotting how to make dinner a little more exciting. But bread is relentless. It's not just a meal, it's a lifestyle. And the older it gets, the more creative you have to become. Some loaves are grated into porridge, others are used to thicken soups, and the truly desperate turn them into trenchers, plates made of bread, meant to soak up stew before being eaten, or more often, to fed to the pigs. Either way, everyone involved is slightly disappointed. Of course, if you're at a feast, lucky you might get white bread, the medieval gold standard. But this too comes with a price. Soft, sifted flour has almost no bran left, and absolutely zero intention of helping your colon out. So even the nobility, surrounded by platters and pageantry, are privately struggling in ways no tapestry ever captured. Bread was life, but bread was also a curse. There's no sourdough starter, no whole wheat for heart health, no fluffy supermarket buns. Just an endless cycle of dense, bland, slow-moving loaves and the hope that tomorrow's batch will be kinder. So next time you admire a rustic boule or grumble about the crust on your toast, remember, in medieval Europe, bread was always waiting. and so were you. How many leafy greens did you eat today? If you're medieval, probably 0. Your daily intake of fiber is about the same as your chances of becoming king, non-existent. Vegetables in the Middle Ages were like guests who RSVP'd maybe and never showed up. Somewhere, deep in a monastery manuscript, a monk is writing about salat, a fresh salad of greens, herbs, and maybe a bean or two. But for you, a humble peasant, the only green thing in your life is probably the mold on last week's bread. The closest you get to a leafy vegetable is the memory of a turnip your neighbour waved at you last Michaelmas. It's not that vegetables don't exist. They do, somewhere, at some time of year, for somebody else. But storage is a nightmare, and growing seasons are short. Anything fresh is snapped up the moment it's picked. If you're lucky, your pottage might feature a cameo appearance by a cabbage leaf, a wilting onion, or a carrot that's more beige than orange. But 9 days out of 10, your stew is just a faintly coloured water with whatever root vegetables survive the winter, usually just enough to hint at health, but never enough to actually provide it. Remember those colourful, crisp salads from your fridge? In medieval Europe, lettuce is just an idea. Spinach is for the monks, chard is for the garden of a patient housewife, and peas and beans are so precious they're counted by hand. If you're hoping for broccoli, well, best of luck. Tomatoes? Potatoes? Those haven't even been invented yet, because the Americas are still keeping their secrets. You're eating the same handful of local vegetables, season after season, in quantities so tiny they could be homeopathic. But let's say, by some miracle, you do get your hands on a bundle of kale or a few wild herbs. The medieval cookbooks, yes, they exist, will tell you to boil them to oblivion, mash them into your pottage, or stew them until all colour and texture has fled for safety. Fibre? More like fibre ghost. The few vitamins are run out of town before they can do any good. If you're hoping to eat the rainbow, you'd better settle for eat the beige spectrum with a hint of green sadness. Why is it this way? Simple. Vegetables are labour, intensive, fragile, and not exactly beloved. Medieval folks considered them peasant food at best and suspect at worst. Some even worried that too much raw produce was bad for your humours, or worse, could bring on mysterious windiness. There's nothing like biting into a raw radish and worrying about an existential crisis later. The nobles, of course, have gardens. They might serve up peas, beans, and the occasional rare artichoke, but even their tables are heavy on the meats, cheeses, and white bread. If there are greens, they're often just garnish or filler, more for show than substance. No wonder everyone at the table looks a little uncomfortable, and no one is quite willing to bring up the topic of regularity. Even preservation is a struggle. Pickling exists, but it's mostly for cucumbers or cabbage, and that's reserved for winter, when the food gets even more monotonous. By February, you're chewing on pickled turnip, salted onion, or maybe a bit of dried wild leek, just to remember what flavour was like. Most vegetables, though, are seasonal guests. Here for a week, gone for a year, not even enough time to get attached. So your average day is spent in a perpetual fibre drought. You dream of roughage, fantasize about peas, and maybe, just maybe, lick the bowl in case a stray lentil was hiding at the bottom. You trade your soul for a salad, but the devil himself can't deliver what the climate, customs, and culinary habits simply won't allow. In the Middle Ages, vegetables are the missing mystery, and your bowels, my friend, remain equally mysterious, locked in suspense, hoping, against all odds, for a miracle sprout. The noble diet was heavy on meat, but let's just say that eating nothing but beef stew and boiled mutton has consequences, none of them smooth. Welcome to the high table, where social status is measured by how many animals you can fit onto a single platter, and also by how many days you can go without, well, going. In medieval society, if you're important, your meals are basically a parade of protein. Venison, boar, beef, pork, chicken, goose, and on especially festive days, a swan or peacock, usually served with the feathers reattached for maximum intimidation and minimum practicality. The logic is simple. More meat equals more power. No one wants to be caught chewing on a humble cabbage when they could be gnawing on a joint of roast beef the size of a small dog. Besides, all those peasants are working overtime in the fields so that your next banquet can feature 3 separate species of bird stacked precariously in a meat tower that defies structural engineering and common sense. And yet, as you tuck into your 3rd helping of mutton stew, you might start to sense a rumble. Not the pleasant something's moving kind, but the ominous something is definitely not moving variety. That's because the medieval noble's table is almost entirely devoid of fibre. For every serving of meat, there's a notable absence of greens. Vegetables are regarded with deep suspicion, mostly relegated to the corners of the plate, if they make an appearance at all. The attitude is, why eat turnips when you can have another leg of rabbit? Don't get too jealous, though. The downside of this carnivorous lifestyle is what physicians now call medieval meat syndrome. That's not a technical term, but it could be. With every mouthful of roast goose and blood sausage, your intestines brace for impact. It's a world where digestion is less a process and more a negotiation, where the exit sign is permanently out of order. It's not just the nobility who suffer. When peasants do get meat, usually in tiny amounts, usually as a flavouring rather than a main course, they tend to go all in. Feast days, weddings, or the occasional, suspiciously timed livestock death might mean a rare taste of pork fat or old chicken. The results are mixed. Delight at first, then regret, then a silent plea for mercy from every organ south of the ribs. Let's not forget that preservation was a whole different challenge. Without refrigeration, most meat was salted, smoked, or dried to the point where it could survive a siege, an outbreak, or an accidental drop off the battlements. Each salty, leathery bite is an act of endurance, and your kidneys start drafting protest letters by the end of the meal. Meat was sometimes so tough it could be reused as a doorstop, or boiled for hours just to make it chewable. The resulting stew? A flavorful broth, sure, but still suspiciously devoid of anything green or helpful. Then there are medieval food taboos: fish on Fridays, endless meat on feast days, and long, bleak stretches of Lent, where even nobles must face the horror of a meal without animal protein. But as soon as the church bells ring for Easter, it's back to business as usual: roast everything, and maybe a token leek for colour. The great irony? Despite having more food than the average peasant, the noble gut is no happier, and sometimes a great deal more tragic. Portraits of kings and lords rarely show them smiling, and you now know why. Life at the top comes with its own digestive price tag. If you're constipated in velvet, you're still constipated. So, next time you fantasize about a grand medieval banquet, remember, too much meat, too little movement. The consequences are historic, the discomfort is timeless, and the fibre, well, it's still not invited to dinner. Cheese was life, but also cheese was blockages. No refrigeration, no probiotics, just a lot of prayers and even more curd. In medieval Europe, dairy was both a daily staple and a daily gamble. If you were lucky enough to own a cow, goat, or even the occasional sheep, you could look forward to a steady, if unpredictable, supply of milk. The only catch? That milk needed to be used quickly, because in a world without refrigeration, it went from fresh and creamy to suspiciously alive in the time it took to recite a prayer for your intestines. Enter cheese. Humanity's earliest attempt at making milk less terrifying and slightly more portable. Medieval cheese came in all shapes and smells: soft, hard, crumbly, squeaky, and everything in between. Sometimes it was sharp, sometimes it was bland, and sometimes it was simply what happened to the milk when you left it alone for a week and hoped for the best. Aging wasn't a science. It was what happened when you forgot about your cheese until it looked interesting enough to eat again. But as every medieval peasant soon discovered, the joy of cheese was matched only by its tenacity. Fresh cheese might be soft and spreadable, but after a few days, it turned into a block with the density of medieval philosophy. Hard cheese was less a food and more a challenge. Cutting it required a knife, a mallet, and sometimes the moral support of your neighbors. And when you finally managed a chunk, your digestive system began quietly preparing for a siege. Because here's the thing, medieval cheese had exactly 0 live probiotics. No helpful bacteria to keep things moving. Instead, you had calcium, protein, and enough casein to gum up the works for days. The softer the cheese, the faster it spoiled. The harder the cheese, the longer it lasted. And the longer you waited for your next successful bathroom trip. It's no wonder that prayers for deliverance took on a whole new meaning after a particularly cheesy supper. Yogurt? Forget it. Medieval folks made something called clabber, which is what happens when you let raw milk ferment on a warm windowsill and decide to eat it anyway. Spoiler: it tastes exactly like it sounds. If you wanted something fancier, you might churn butter. But butter, too, came with its own risks. Unpasteurized, unclarified, and unprotected from the local insect population. The safest bet was turning milk into the hardest cheese possible and pretending that chewing it counted as exercise. If you were a peasant, cheese was often your only protein source. Meat was rare, beans unreliable, and eggs strictly seasonal. But cheese was always there, lurking on your table in varying stages of edibility, providing calories, protein, and the faint hope that today might be different. Sometimes, if you were lucky, your cheese would even have a bit of mold, added flavor, they'd say. And if it moved on its own, well, protein is protein. Even the nobility weren't spared. Their tables featured more varieties, but not necessarily better results. Fancy cheese, imported from distant lands, came with the same problems, just higher expectations. And while the rich might pair their cheese with honey, nuts, or fruit preserves, all that extra sugar only added another layer of complication to an already slow-moving internal drama. In winter, cheese was a lifesaver, shelf-stable, filling, and able to withstand the worst peasant children and best efforts of the household cat. In summer, cheese was a risk, a game of how bad is too bad, as the days grew hotter and the dairy's scent grew more pronounced. The answer? Too bad was a moving target, and most people had a high tolerance for danger when the alternative was outright hunger. So you keep eating cheese, hoping the day will come when a miracle occurs and something finally moves. You tell yourself, it's healthy, it's protein, it's tradition. But deep down, you know, medieval cheese was a commitment. And your gut? It's in it for the long haul. Fruit existed, sometimes, usually fermented into wine, which does wonders for forgetting your digestive woes, but absolutely nothing for your colon. In the world of medieval Europe, fruit is a rumor. Something whispered about in song and legend, but rarely sighted in the wild. If you live in a village, you might have an apple tree, or know a guy who knows a guy with a pear tree. But odds are the best fruit you'll see this year is a handful of tiny, sour crab apples or a wild berry you weren't fast enough to beat the birds to. Seasonality is king. Fruit arrives in a brief, glorious burst, usually in late summer or early autumn, and then vanishes for the rest of the year, like a party guest who leaves early but is still talked about for months. For a precious week or two, everyone is gorging themselves on whatever they can grab. Plums, cherries, strawberries, maybe even some wild currants if you're feeling lucky. There's no saving it. There's no freezer. Drying is possible, but only if you have the luxury of time and a lack of hungry neighbors. For the noble set, things aren't much better. Sure, there are orchards, walled gardens where apples, pears, and the occasional imported fig cling to life. But even these delicacies don't last. Wealth buys you a slightly longer fruit window, but unless you're the king himself, you're still eating more pomegranate seeds in your dreams than at the table. And when fruit does appear, it rarely shows up fresh. In an age before reliable preservation, fruit is most often stewed, baked, or, if the grapes are any good, turned into wine. Yes, wine. The medieval solution for everything, from a lack of clean water to a lack of coping mechanisms. Sadly, no matter how many goblets you down, it's not going to help with your ongoing intestinal stalemate. In fact, it might only encourage your body to double down on the problem. Even if you do get your hands on a fresh piece of fruit, it's not the juicy, supermarket polished apple of today. It's small, hard, and covered in a suspiciously thick skin. You take a bite. It's tart. So tart, in fact, that your face threatens to turn inside out. You tell yourself it's refreshing, but deep down you know you're eating the medieval equivalent of a prank. Preserved fruit is a luxury. Dried apples, plums, or pears, if you're lucky and can keep them away from the damp and the mice. More often, fruit ends up in a pie, but not the kind with flaky crusts and sweet filling. Think more along the lines of warm, slightly lumpy, and seasoned with hope. If you're truly fancy, you might find quince paste or candied orange peel at a festival. These are the medieval superfoods, so rare that you don't eat them for health, but to show off. Nobles will pass around a tray of dried figs, everyone pretending not to care, while silently counting to make sure they get their share. Of course, there's always the risk that eating too much fruit at once, say more than 2 whole plums, will cause your body to panic. Centuries of deprivation means nobody's system is ready for sudden fiber. There are stories of entire villages grinding to a halt after someone raided a wild cherry tree. Then, before you know it, the fruit is gone again. Your dreams of regularity fade with the autumn fog, and it's back to bread, cheese, and that ever-present pottage. You look at the empty orchard and sigh, wondering if fruit was just a medieval myth invented by the clergy to keep people hopeful. But no, fruit is real. It's just shy, and it works on its own unpredictable schedule. And in the meantime, you'll have to make do with another mug of wine, raising a toast to the day when apples come more than once a year, and your colon can finally remember what to do with them. Ah yes, pottage, the catch-all stew, full of whatever was left in the bottom of the barrel. Vegetables? Sometimes. Fibre? Only if you count splinters. Welcome to the culinary cornerstone of the medieval diet. Pottage. Think of it as the ultimate mystery meal. Every family's pot simmers endlessly over the fire, a bubbling cauldron of, well, something. There's no recipe, no meal prep calendar, and absolutely no guarantee of variety. If you're hoping for a bowl of hearty, nutritious goodness, prepare to be spectacularly disappointed. Pottage is less a soup and more a social experiment in culinary endurance. Here's how it works. You wake up hungry, peer into the pot, and discover that yesterday's stew is still there, just with a slightly new personality. Each day you add whatever scraps you can find. Bits of grain, a shriveled turnip, or maybe the green half of an onion. Sometimes you get lucky, and a neighbor swaps a carrot for your last 2 leeks. Sometimes you're less lucky, and you drop your only cabbage leaf in the dirt before it reaches the pot. 5-second rule? In medieval times, that's just wishful thinking. The liquid part of pottage is mostly water, with a touch of weak ale for flavour, and if you're lucky, the vague memory of yesterday's salted meat. If you manage to get a bone from the butcher, you're in business. Just don't expect any actual meat left on it. The marrow's long gone, and what remains is more a suggestion of flavour than a real ingredient. Boiling it for days is considered the medieval version of infusing. Mostly, it just softens up whatever twigs, roots, and surprise additions are still swirling around. Texture is best described as chunky, uncertain. 1 spoonful might be all barley. The next, all water. Occasionally you'll find something chewy and unidentifiable. A mystery root, perhaps, or an ancient lentil that's been rehydrated back to life for the 3rd time this week. Is it fibre? Maybe. Is it edible? You'll find out later, one way or another. Let's address the elephant in the room. Taste. Pottage is not seasoned for pleasure. Salt is precious, pepper is a fantasy, and herbs are whatever you found growing near the privy. Garlic, onions, or wild mustard leaves occasionally rescue the pot from pure monotony, but more often than not, the flavor profile is earthy disappointment with a hint of yesterday's hope. If you think that sounds sad, imagine eating it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for months on end. Gruel, pottage's even sadder cousin, makes an appearance when times are especially tough. Thin, watery, and made from whatever grain you have, it's the medieval answer to the question, what's the least satisfying way to not starve? You slurp it down, trying not to think about the complete lack of texture. Gruel is a bowl of warm, soupy surrender. Some people swear it's easier to digest, but let's be honest, it's easier because there's nothing in it. Despite its many shortcomings, pottage is reliable. It's there when you're cold, when you're hungry, and when you're not sure if anything else in your life will ever change. It's a communal experience. Families eat from the same pot, sharing not just food, but germs, questionable backwash, and the lingering sense that dinner could always be worse. If you're a noble, your pottage is fancier, maybe even a splash of wine or a hint of imported spice. But at its core, even the richest stew can't disguise the fact that it's still just stuff cooked until it gives up. Nobles might add chicken, rabbit, or beef, but the ratio of regret to reward remains remarkably high. And so, as you scrape the bottom of the bowl again, you realize pottage is more than food. It's a medieval lesson in resilience, humility, and the power of very, very low expectations. The rare day you get beans, your body doesn't know whether to celebrate or riot. Prepare for noise, not movement. For the medieval peasant, beans and lentils are about as close as you'll ever get to a miracle cure, one that comes with a few notable side effects. Most days you subsist on bread, pottage, and the occasional whiff of cheese. But once in a blue moon you find yourself clutching a handful of dried fava beans or a small sack of lentils. In a world with no Google and even less dietary advice, this is like discovering the lost city of fiber. Let's not kid ourselves. Beans are not an everyday luxury. They're a treat, but only in the way that suddenly finding a clean wooden spoon is a treat. Technically true, but not as exciting as you'd hoped. When times are hard, which is always, dried legumes might save your lifer. At the very least, give you something different to chew on besides week-old rye. And when your luck is in, your family's dinner conversation will revolve around that blessed pot of bubbling beans. Who cooked them, who gets the last scoop, and who will be sleeping furthest from the fire tonight. Just in case. Medieval beans are a mystery unto themselves. No one is soaking them overnight or following a clever YouTube hack. Instead, they're thrown straight into the pot, shells and all, and boiled until they either surrender or take hostages. The result is a hearty, lumpy mess that is equal parts protein, grit, and suspense. If you get lentils, congratulations. You're enjoying what historians now call the peasant's steak. Your gut is cautiously optimistic, but your social life is about to take a dramatic turn. The benefits? Beans and lentils are packed with what your body has been missing: protein, fiber, a vague sense of hope. For a brief moment, you imagine your insides springing back to life, right up until you remember that your digestive system has been running on medieval bread and cheese for months. The result is, shall we say, active. In a perfect world, beans would usher in a golden age of regularity. In the Middle Ages, the most immediate result is a chorus of gurgles, groans, and the kind of musicality that would make a monk blush. And let's be honest, the reputation is deserved. The phrase musical fruit might not have been coined until later, but the medieval countryside is well acquainted with its implications. If there's a gathering at the village green the day after bean night, you can expect to find everyone fanning themselves and looking suspiciously at the goats, who are also not impressed. There's another twist. Not all beans are created equal. Some are so tough, you wonder if they're meant for eating or for reinforcing the thatched roof. Others come with a warning. Broad beans, for example, can trigger mysterious and terrifying illnesses in some people, though no one knows why. The safest bet is to eat whatever is on offer, chew carefully, and pray. For medieval doctors, beans are a double-edged sword. On one hand, they're one of the only ways to get much-needed nutrients into your body. On the other, they're blamed for windiness and occasionally for corrupting the humours. Still, most people are willing to risk a little gastrointestinal drama for a rare shot at full belly satisfaction. If you're a noble, you're probably not eating beans unless you're pretending to be rustic at a themed banquet. For peasants, they're a rare treat, humbling, filling, and occasionally thrilling. One thing is certain, beans never go unnoticed, and no one ever forgets the day after. So you eat, you hope, and you brace for impact. Because in the Middle Ages, beans are a blessing, a curse, and a surefire conversation starter at every communal meal. Medieval water is deadly, so everyone drinks ale. Fun fact: ale does not, in fact, help you go. Let's set the scene. You wake up, parched from the night before, hoping for a glass of cool, clean water. That's adorable. Instead, you reach for the only thing less likely to kill you, ale. Not the fun, double-hopped, craft microbrew you're imagining, but small ale, the medieval answer to both hydration and existential dread. It's a thin, weak brew with just enough alcohol to kill off the worst microbes, but not enough to distract you from the taste. Congratulations, you're drinking what amounts to lightly alcoholic soup. Children drink it, pregnant women drink it, monks drink it. If you're alive in the Middle Ages, you're basically on a perpetual pub crawl, whether you want to be or not. Why? Because water in this era is less a beverage and more a live-action bacteria exhibit. Streams and wells are polluted with everything from animal waste to last week's failed chamber pot toss. If you're lucky enough to live upstream, enjoy it while it lasts. If not, you're in for a world of trouble with every sip. Enter ale. It's cheap, it's available, and it's slightly less deadly than the water. But it's also, paradoxically, part of the reason your digestive tract has thrown in the towel. You drink, and you drink, and you drink, but nothing's happening south of your belt except a faint, yeasty bloat. Medieval ale contains almost no fibre, no nutrients, and certainly no magical gut-stimulating properties. If anything, it keeps everything right where it is, preserving your insides the way it preserves last week's bread crust that fell in the cup. Your relationship with ale is complicated. On one hand, it keeps you from dying of dysentery. On the other, it means you're now running on a system that's roughly 30% barley, 30% mystery water, and 40% collective denial. The good stuff, the stronger brews, are reserved for festivals, holidays, and any moment when you've completely given up on the week. Otherwise, it's small beer for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You'd like to imagine this keeps you cheerful and hydrated. Mostly, it keeps you in a permanent state of gently buzzed and forever thirsty. For peasants, ale is life. You pay your rent in grain, you receive your wages in drink, and you sometimes take your medicine in the form of a hot, spiced beer that someone swears will cure what ails you. Spoiler, it doesn't. For the nobility, the only real difference is the size of the tankard and the likelihood that the cupbearer actually washed it this month. There's a darker side to this frothy paradise, chronic dehydration. Despite what medieval wisdom might suggest, a pint of ale is not the same as a glass of water, and your body knows it. People spend their lives slightly parched, often confused, and permanently underwhelmed by the taste of their own breakfast. Meanwhile, the idea of clean water is something you pray for, write about in your will, and suspect might be waiting in heaven. If you're expecting ale to help move things along in your digestive tract, you're in for disappointment. In fact, it does the opposite. The small amounts of alcohol slow things down, and the absence of fibre means your intestines are working overtime with nothing to show for it. Medieval folk might have sworn by ale's healing powers, but their guts knew better. Any relief you feel is mostly psychological, or maybe just wishful thinking. Still, ale does have its perks. It's a reason to gather, to celebrate, and to pretend that everything is perfectly normal. You clink your wooden mugs with your fellow villagers, ignore the subtle hints of barley at the bottom, and raise a toast to another day of medieval survival, hydrated, mildly tipsy, and still somehow, waiting for nature to call. Where do you go when there's nowhere to go? A world without flush toilets is a world of creative suffering. Let's paint the picture. You wake up, your bowels finally stirring after days of medieval suspense. Hope rises. But then reality sets in. You're in the 14th century, and the nearest thing to a bathroom is either a chamber pot under the bed or a highly suspicious wooden shack at the edge of the yard. There's no running water, no privacy, and certainly no inspirational quote stenciled on the wall. If you're a peasant, your bathroom is wherever modesty and desperation intersect. Sometimes it's a shared pit in the corner of the garden, just a hole in the ground, generously accessorized by swarms of flies and the occasional curious chicken. The family takes turns, sort of. In theory, it's a private affair, but in practice, you're likely to be watched by at least one neighbor, 3 livestock, and the local stray cat. You think you've found a moment alone, only to realize that the cat has seen things that will haunt its 9 lives. Chamber pots are another option, but option is a strong word. They're usually communal, rarely empty, and always a little too close to the family hearth for comfort. Emptying them is the worst job in the house. Worse than scraping the pottage pot. Worse than combing lice from your cousin's hair. Every day, someone is assigned to take the pot outside, find a convenient bush, or simply fling the contents into the nearest open ditch. If you live in town, congratulations, your waste goes straight into the street along with everyone else's. It's customary to shout "Garde l'eau," which is Old French for "look out below." Before dumping, nobody ever moves fast enough. For city dwellers, there might be a public latrine, usually perched over a sluggish, open sewer. This is less a bathroom and more a communal humiliation ritual. Picture a long, drafty wooden bench with holes cut into it, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, all pretending to ignore each other's existence. Privacy? You wish. Ventilation? Only if you count howling wind off the moat. Every so often something valuable drops through the hole and is never seen again. Wedding rings, dignity, hope. Castles and manor houses, with all their splendor, are not much better. You might get a garderobe, a kind of medieval ensuite, which is really just a small stone closet with a hole straight down the outer wall. If you're lucky, your waste lands in a cesspit or a moat. If you're unlucky, it joins the miasma, slowly seeping into the castle foundations. On the bright side, the cold draft helps keep the smells at bay. On the less bright side, siege warfare has been known to feature daring attacks via the garderobe chute. There's nothing like defending your home by plugging up the enemy with your own household waste. Toilet paper? A fantasy for future generations. In the Middle Ages, you make do with moss, handfuls of straw, old rags, or if you're feeling flush, a scrap of linen. Leaves work if it's summer. If it's winter, you're left with a moral quandary and a frozen hand. And just to make things interesting, hygiene is an afterthought. Soap is rare and precious. Water is hauled in buckets, one painful trip at a time. Washing your hands afterward is a best-case scenario, not a guarantee. Everyone shakes hands a little warily because everyone knows. So the next time you sit on your porcelain throne, door locked, fan humming, maybe send up a grateful thought to your medieval ancestors. Because for them, the only thing harder than going was finding a place to go in the first place. Forget two-ply. Your choices are straw, moss, or, if you're feeling royal, a piece of old linen. None are gentle. Welcome to the cutting edge of medieval hygiene, the world of toilet paper, or, more accurately, the world before toilet paper. In your modern bathroom, you probably take for granted the plush, quilted comforts of a roll within arm's reach. Maybe you even have a backup roll pyramid stacked nearby, ready for any emergency. But in the Middle Ages, wiping was a choose-your-own adventure, and none of the endings were happy. Let's start with the basics. Straw. It's plentiful, it's absorbent-ish, and it's sharp enough to keep you humble. Imagine finishing up your business only to reach for a handful of what is essentially nature's broom bristles. You try to convince yourself that it's rustic and natural, but the reality is an experience that's more exfoliating than cleansing. Splinters become an occupational hazard. If your day starts with straw, your walk ends with a limp, then there's moss. Soft, green, and surprisingly effective if you happen to live near a shady patch of woods and don't mind the occasional bug hitchhiker. Moss was the medieval gold standard for those in the know. It's cool, it's gentle, and best of all, it grows back. But let's be honest, moss is a seasonal luxury. Come winter, you're out of luck. And, in the long, dark months when everything is frozen solid, even the bravest soul hesitates before grabbing a clump of icy vegetation. Feeling fancy? Maybe you're a minor noble, or you happen to have access to the rag pile. Enter the linen wipe. Linen is soft and absorbent, but in a world where every scrap of fabric is precious, using it as toilet paper is a luxury bordering on scandalous. Old linen shirts or discarded undergarments are cut into small squares, used, and then, if you have household staff, sent off to be washed for reuse. And if you don't, you just hope the river carries your regrets far downstream. For those with an experimental streak, there's always the whatever is handy method. Leaves, corn cobs, handfuls of grass, or if you're desperate and alone, the corner of your own tunic. Medieval manuscripts don't often dwell on these gritty details, but you know that necessity is the mother of invention, and sometimes the mother of a lifetime's worth of discomfort. Of course, the truly unlucky go with nothing at all. It's hard to overstate how common this was. In cities and among the poorest, the best you could do might be a vigorous shuffle in the grass or a quick, discreet wipe with the edge of your shoe. The result? A distinct lack of confidence when rejoining society, and an explanation for why shaking hands was not the preferred greeting of the era. Sanitation was, at best, a community project. Piles of used moss and straw would accumulate behind the house, alongside other household waste. Rain and time did what they could. But let's just say that the medieval countryside had an aroma all its own. Sometimes, cleanliness was measured by how well you avoided infection, not by how you actually felt. And if you're still not grateful for modern plumbing and paper goods, imagine this. You're at a feast in a noble's great hall. Nature calls, and you're shown to a cold stone room with a draughty hole and a lonely basket of straw. You do what must be done, gather your dignity, and return to the table with a new appreciation for every quilted roll yet to be invented. So tonight, when you reach for that soft, modern miracle, spare a thought for your medieval ancestors. They walked so your bum could run, gently, comfortably, and without fear of splinters. You finally feel the urge after 5 days of suspense. Time to make the harrowing walk to the chamber pot, located in full view of everyone you know. In medieval times, privacy was a luxury only slightly less rare than fresh fruit or a regular bowel movement. Your home is a one-room affair, crowded with family, farmhands, a visiting cousin, and possibly a chicken or two. The chamber pot sits in a dignified place of honor, right in the corner, mere feet from where you sleep, eat, and attempt to have profound conversations about the weather. It's not just a container, it's a public event. You shuffle over, clutching your tunic and your dignity, acutely aware that every eye is upon you. No one says a word, but everyone is silently cataloguing your every move. The kids are pretending not to notice, your spouse is pretending to be asleep, and your mother-in-law is silently judging your technique. Even the dog looks away in shared embarrassment. The chamber pot itself is no thing of beauty. Made of wood, clay, or, if you're wealthy, ceramic, it is sturdy, unglamorous, and always slightly the wrong temperature. No one in history has ever described a chamber pot as inviting. It is a vessel for hope, regret, and a daily reminder that indoor plumbing is centuries away. There's a handle, sometimes. There's a lid, rarely. There's a smell, always. The moment arrives, you do your business, staring resolutely at the thatch roof, hoping that the gods of digestion are feeling merciful. The acoustics are unfortunately excellent, and the pot itself does nothing to muffle the sound. Every creak of the floorboards and every subtle plop is a symphony of humiliation. You wonder if anyone will applaud when you're done. In the Middle Ages, this is what passes for personal growth. The worst part isn't the act itself, but what comes next, the disposal. Chamber pots do not empty themselves, and medieval families have a strict, if unwritten, rotation of responsibility. If you're the unlucky soul on pot duty, you take the offending object, walk through the house, and out into the yard or alley. If you live in a town, the contents might be dumped straight out the window onto the street below, with a perfunctory yell of "Gardez l'eau," or in English, "heads up." If you're in the countryside, you hope to find a spot where the wind is blowing the right way and the neighbours aren't hanging laundry. There's a hierarchy to chamber pots. Nobles might have porcelain, engraved with family crests or devotional prayers. The king himself had a special close stool, an early throne, within a throne, attended by a servant with a job title no one envied. The rest of us make do with whatever is at hand, sometimes improvising with buckets, broken jugs, or, in a pinch, a well-placed hole in the floor. Every vessel tells a story. None of them are happy stories. Cleaning the chamber pot is another adventure. There's no bleach, no pleasant floral sprays, just cold water and the vague hope that the next user will never know what happened before. Scrubbing is half-hearted at best, and the line between clean and not actively threatening is flexible, depending on the day. The smell lingers, becoming another layer in the olfactory wallpaper of your medieval life. And yet, the chamber pot is part of your daily rhythm, a ritual shared by all, from lords to labourers. It's a reminder that, when nature calls, everyone is equal, equally mortified, equally resigned, equally desperate for a better solution. So, as you make your walk of shame back to bed, try to take comfort in knowing that at least you've won today's round of the chamber pot lottery. Tomorrow, someone else's turn. And one day, far in the future, a porcelain throne will await your descendants, no audience required. For city folk, there's the public latrine, a terrifying communal affair where constipation is actually the polite option. Step into any medieval city, and you'll find a place where all social hierarchies vanish, small talk gets awkward, and the air is thick with the sense of courage and cabbage, the public latrine. Forget everything you know about private stalls and ambient spa music. Here, the restroom is less of a sanctuary and more of a group project, an open-plan disaster that makes every introvert long for the fields. Imagine a long, drafty wooden bench, with holes evenly spaced like musical notes. Beneath, a pit or a sluggish trench drains somewhere. Privacy? Not a chance. The most you can hope for is a thin, mouldy curtain, and even that's just there for show. Everyone knows what you're up to. If you're lucky, the latrine sits over a river, gently encouraging your worries to drift downstream. If you're not, everything just collects until a desperate team of gong farmers, the bravest souls in town, scoop it out and haul it away. It's a job so undesirable that people would rather join the next crusade. Every visit to the public latrine is an event. You shuffle in, avoid eye contact, and try to find a spot that looks least haunted by prior visitors. Around you, a spectrum of humanity. Bakers, butchers, noblemen with handkerchiefs pressed to their noses, children making fart jokes in medieval French, and at least one merchant loudly insisting that this was not his idea. Everyone is united by a single, humbling goal to go and get out as fast as possible. Conversation is not encouraged, but it happens anyway. Whispers of gossip, market rumours, the price of bread, and, if things get truly desperate, comparisons of digestive suffering. It's the original water cooler, minus the water, and plus a whole lot of shared discomfort. The bravest souls multitask, finishing business deals or arranging marriages over the hum of other, less appealing noises. You want to marry my daughter? We'll see if you still do after you've spent 5 minutes here. Of course, for some, the social risk is too great. You develop the unique medieval talent of holding it for hours, maybe even days, just to avoid a public performance. Constipation becomes a badge of social caution. Who wants to be remembered as the person who couldn't keep quiet on the bench? In fact, there's a strong, unspoken etiquette. No staring, no jokes, and absolutely no commentary on whatever you hear or smell while inside. Cleanliness is a moving target. There's no running water, no soap, just a shared bucket for hand washing that everyone suspects is making things worse. Some people bring their own moss or rags, and the lucky few arrive with a sprig of mint to hold under the nose. The bench itself is wiped down with whatever's handy, a stick, a sleeve, or just a resigned sigh. The real heroes of the story, the gong farmers, work at night, shoveling waste into carts and hauling it beyond the city walls. They are well paid, by medieval standards, but socially invisible, living on the fringes, regarded with a mixture of awe and pity. Without them, the city would be overrun. With them, the public latrine can continue to welcome each new generation of nervous, socially anxious citizens. In the end, the medieval public latrine is less about hygiene and more about community, a humbling, occasionally traumatic reminder that everyone, from the richest merchant to the poorest apprentice, is brought together by the call of nature. It's the great equalizer, the ultimate networking event, and possibly the best incentive history ever produced for inventing indoor plumbing. So, next time you sit in a private stall with a lock on the door, light a scented candle in silent gratitude. The medieval public latrine walked so your bathroom could run, quietly, privately, and mercifully alone. The church blames everything on sin, including your blocked bowels. Maybe if you prayed harder, you'd have gone by now. In medieval Europe, the spiritual and the physical were tangled up tighter than a peasant's belt after a cheese-heavy feast. If something went wrong in your life, failing crops, a bout of the plague, or, yes, a case of stubborn constipation, the first stop was not a doctor, but a priest. In a world where science was mostly a rumour and the medical profession just a hair above enthusiastic butchers, your bowels were under constant divine surveillance. Church bells ring, summoning you to confess both your spiritual shortcomings and your dietary failures. After 5 days of waiting for a miracle in the chamber pot, you start to wonder if you angered a saint. Perhaps it was that skipped prayer last Lent, or that time you thought an uncharitable thought about Brother Thomas's singing. Regardless, everyone agrees. Regularity is next to godliness. And you, my friend, are in desperate need of redemption. Local priests have advice for every spiritual woe. Constipated? Clearly, it's a sign of unbalanced humours or unbalanced morals. Sin, they whisper, sits heavy on the soul and the stomach. There are sermons on the dangers of sloth, gluttony, and prideful thinking. The congregation nods along, all secretly praying that today will be the day their internal suffering comes to an end. The truly desperate light candles to Saint Fiacre, unofficial patron saint of hemorrhoids and those afflicted by sitting. His shrine is busy. Confession becomes a double-edged sword. You reveal your secret shame, hoping for relief, either physical or spiritual. Maybe a little less coveting, a little more generosity, and next time, things will move along more smoothly. There are prayers for everything, from rain to harvest, but you start to wonder if anyone has written a novena for the miracle of regularity. The church, always practical, reminds you that suffering is a path to holiness. In other words, your blocked gut is just another trial to be endured, a step on the long staircase to heaven. At least you're not alone. Misery, as it turns out, is the best congregation builder. If prayer doesn't work, there are other, more colourful options. Pilgrims tell tales of holy relics that can cure the worst cases, a splinter of the true cross, a lock of hair from a famously regular saint, drink from a blessed well, swallow a pinch of holy dust, or sleep with a prayer scroll under your pillow. You try everything, because at this point, faith is the only laxative you can afford. The village herbalist mutters about prayer and parsley, but the priest gives you a stern look. Trust in God, not in salad. Festivals and feast days provide moments of hope. There's dancing, singing, and, for one glorious day, meat and wine that might inspire something to happen. But beware. The church also preaches fasting as a spiritual discipline. Fasting can bring enlightenment and clarity, or, for most, even more sluggishness. It's hard to ponder divine mysteries when you're worried about your digestive ones. Of course, not everyone buys the spiritual explanation. There's always that one skeptic in the village, usually the local miller, who suspects the only thing sin is blocking is the road to a better diet. But in a world ruled by ritual and guided by the church calendar, few are brave enough to question the divine origins of constipation. Ultimately, the medieval church provides structure, meaning, and, yes, a little bit of scapegoating for your slow-moving woes. Your blocked bowels aren't just your problem. They're a community event, a subject for public prayer and private reflection. So, as you kneel in the pew, hands folded and heart heavy, you hope for deliverance, not just of the soul, but of everything else too. Because in the Middle Ages, salvation and regularity often felt like the same thing, and both were best approached on your knees. Feeling desperate? Local remedies include herbs, hot drinks, or, when all else fails, a medieval physic, aka a terrifying laxative. Medieval medicine is less doctor knows best, and more doctor is guessing. Loudly, with whatever's lying around. After 5 days of gut-wrenching suspense, you've prayed, you've repented, and now it's time to try what passes for healthcare. Hope you're ready, because relief is about to take the scenic route. First up, the herbalist's remedies. Every village has a wise woman or man who swears by their own, highly aromatic collection of leaves, roots, and powders. Their cottage smells like damp hay and regret. The cure for constipation? Maybe a tea of fennel, parsley, or wild chicory. If you're really lucky, a dash of mint, just to make things slightly less miserable. You drink it down and wait for the magic. Mostly, you end up with nothing but a strong sense of disappointment and a mouth that tastes like a sheep's lunch. Hot drinks are another crowd favourite. Boiling water, never trusted on its own, becomes slightly safer if you throw in a handful of medicinal herbs. A nice warm cup can coax the body, at least in theory, into doing what it's supposed to do. There's no scientific backing, but it's hard to be picky when your only other option is prayer and patience. And speaking of patience, when herbs and hot drinks fail, it's time for something more dramatic. Enter the physic. This medieval cure-all is the ancestor of modern laxatives, but with none of the gentle branding or reassuring side effects. A physic could be anything from a syrupy concoction of honey and oil to a more aggressive blend of senna, rhubarb root, or even aloe, if your village imports such exotic luxuries. The herbalist measures out a dose that could be described as optimistically reckless. You close your eyes and swallow, clinging to the hope that your ancestors survived this for a reason. If you're truly desperate, or unlucky, you might find yourself at the door of the local barber surgeon. His qualifications? A steady hand with scissors, and the ability to look you in the eye while recommending a good purgative. His treatment options are as varied as they are terrifying. Hot poultices, cupping, and, for the bold, a suppository made from boiled soap and goose fat. No, you don't get anesthesia. You just get the comfort of knowing this is the same guy who sharpens your neighbour's sickle. Some physics are worse than others. Castor oil is available, if someone's managed to get hold of the seeds and survived the process. Medieval texts recommend a moderate walk, followed by a draught of strong wine. The wine helps you forget what's coming next. Most potions taste like they were invented on a dare. And you start to wonder if enduring constipation isn't the better option. Not all remedies are physical. There are charms and chants, written prayers to St. Elmo or St. Fiacre, and even elaborate rituals involving eggshells or ashes. Some villagers believe that simply tying a ribbon around your waist will unblock the flow. Others try jumping backwards over a broom, or wearing a sprig of rosemary in their cap. If it works, everyone swears by it. If it doesn't, you just try harder next time. And then Sometimes, after all the drama and herbal experimentation, nature finally runs its course. It's impossible to know what did the trick. Was it the tea, the prayer, the threat of another visit to the barber, or sheer, stubborn willpower? Either way, you thank every saint and every plant in the garden as you shuffle back from the chamber pot, victorious and exhausted. In the end, medieval medicine is a gamble, part science, part superstition, all adventure. Because when it comes to purgatives, the only certainty is that tomorrow you'll be telling a story, and it probably won't be gentle. Still stuck? Time to visit the medieval doctor. Spoiler, he's also the town barber, and might suggest leeches or a hot iron. If you've reached the barber surgeon, you've already exhausted your prayers, your herbalist's teas, and possibly your dignity. In the Middle Ages, the line between healthcare professional and enthusiastic amateur was razor thin, sometimes literally, because your doctor is just as likely to give you a shave and a haircut as a diagnosis. Welcome to the all-purpose establishment, where you can get your beard trimmed, your abscess lanced, and your humours balanced, all for one modest fee and a questionable chance of survival. Your symptoms are explained in a hushed tone, mostly because you're still a little embarrassed, and the waiting area, which is just a bench outside, is full of villagers listening for gossip. The barber surgeon listens with the solemnity of a man who's seen far too many things up close and personal. He nods, thoughtfully stroking a mustache that's probably older than you are. Diagnosis is swift. Your humours are out of balance, your blood is thick, and your bowels are possessed of stubbornness. His toolkit is simple: a razor, a set of rusty-looking pincers, a few suspicious vials, and a leather pouch that unfortunately is moving slightly. Inside, leeches. Yes, leeches. Medieval Europe's go-to solution for just about everything, including your current traffic jam. Leeches, he explains, are nature's little helpers. They'll draw out the bad, restore the proper balance of your bodily fluids, and, if you're lucky, won't leave a mark. Spoiler, they always leave a mark. He selects one, plops it on your bare skin, and waits. You watch, fascinated and mildly horrified, as the leech does its work. Time ticks by. The leech grows fat, your dignity grows thin, and the local children peer through the window, eager for a story to share at supper. If you're lucky, the barber surgeon offers a milder option: a hot iron applied to your lower back. It's not as dramatic as it sounds, unless you flinch. Supposedly, the heat wakes up the sluggish gut. Realistically, it just gives you a new problem to complain about. For more stubborn cases, he might recommend a mild bleeding, a shallow cut, a little bowl, and the hope that less blood equals more movement. Medieval math was creative, if nothing else. Of course, the barber surgeon is nothing if not versatile. He'll suggest a change in diet, more onions, a brisk walk until you see the next village, then keep going, or a period of rest, preferably not in his shop, which smells like old broth and burnt hair. If you're feeling truly daring, he offers a homemade enema, delivered with the help of a pig's bladder, a horn, and the blessing of at least 2 saints. Suddenly, the leeches seem charming by comparison. The tools of his trade are rarely cleaned, unless you count wiping with a rag and a prayer. Every procedure is performed in natural light, with an audience, and you're encouraged to be brave for the good of the village. Afterwards, you pay him in coin, bread, or, if funds are tight, a chicken, assuming you still have the strength to haggle. And if none of this works, he shrugs, pats your hand, and assures you that sometimes nature simply must take its course. He recommends a light supper, more ale, and, if you're still in trouble by market day, to stop by again. By then, he'll have sharpened his razors and maybe even acquired a few new leeches. In medieval times, the barber surgeon is both healer and horror, a walking reminder that medicine is a journey, not a destination. And as you limp home, tender in places you never expected, you can at least say you tried everything. Even the leeches. Can't go? Why not try bloodletting? Balancing the humours is just as painful as it sounds. Welcome to the medical marvel of medieval Europe. Bloodletting, the answer to every ailment from headaches to heartbreak. And, yes, even your epic case of constipation. In a world without germ theory, vitamins, or the concept of a balanced diet, all bodily problems were blamed on the mysterious four humours. If your gut wasn't moving, it was clearly because your blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile were having a heated argument somewhere south of your navel. The solution? Let a little of that trouble out. Literally. Bloodletting was the go-to move for medieval health practitioners. If you complained of costiveness, the classier word for being blocked up, the local healer or barber surgeon would break out his favourite kit, a razor-sharp lancet, a collection of ceramic bowls, and a set of bandages that could best be described as optimistically clean. Sometimes, if you were truly unlucky, there might even be a leech or two left over from the last patient, still looking for a snack. The theory was as bold as it was confusing. If your bowels weren't working, it must be that your blood was thick or stagnant. By draining off a pint or two, you'd lighten the load, release the bad humours, and, with any luck, jumpstart the system. Of course, the only thing being lightened was you, and maybe your prospects for a long life. But at least you could take pride in being the latest link in a chain of brave, faintly woozy ancestors. The process itself was dramatic. First, you'd sit in a chair, preferably close to a sturdy table, in case you started to slide. The barber surgeon would tie a tight band around your arm, flex your elbow, and tap your vein with all the confidence of someone who learned medicine from a picture book. Sometimes he'd recite a prayer. Sometimes he'd just hum a little tune and hope for the best. With a swift flick, the lancet opens a vein, and your precious humours begin to flow into the waiting bowl. The colour and speed are judged with a wisdom handed down through generations. Dark blood means you're melancholy, he'd say, and bright red means you need more time in the shade. You try not to look, but you can't help wondering just how much of you is supposed to go. The answer, as always, more than is comfortable, less than is immediately fatal. While you wait, he'll recommend you relax. Never mind that the room is spinning and you're pretty sure you've seen 3 versions of the family dog. You're advised to eat a light meal, if you're able. Avoid strenuous activity, like walking home. And take heart in the knowledge that you are, at this very moment, getting healthier by the bowlful. Never mind that your constipation remains completely unimpressed. Sometimes, the results are instant. Your system, in shock, decides to do anything except what it just did. More often, nothing happens, and you're simply left paler, hungrier, and with a slightly more dramatic story for the next communal dinner. If the procedure didn't work the first time, you might be invited back for another round. After all, perseverance is a virtue. At this rate, you'll either achieve inner harmony or run out of blood. Through it all, the logic remains both baffling and inspiring. Bloodletting didn't solve many problems, but it did give people hope, an ancient, slightly wobbly hope, built on a foundation of creative misunderstanding. So you bandage your arm, thank the barber surgeon for his wisdom, and stagger home. Will your bowels finally move? Only the saints and your surviving blood cells know for sure. In the Middle Ages, when in doubt, bleed it out. And if it doesn't work, at least you have a great excuse to lie down and do absolutely nothing doctor's orders. Your wardrobe doesn't help. Tight laces, thick layers. Nothing says trapped like a double-wrapped woolen tunic. If you think skinny jeans are a modern torture device, imagine getting dressed in the Middle Ages. Medieval fashion was a paradox. Everything was both too loose and too tight, too itchy and too heavy, and almost always layered until you resembled a walking quilt. For men and women alike, getting dressed was less about self-expression and more about survival, surviving the cold, the judgment of neighbours, and, unfortunately, your own digestive system's desperate pleas for freedom. Let's start with the basics. Under all those clothes, you might, if you're lucky, have a linen chemise or shirt. Soft, absorbent, and about as rare as a fresh fig in February, This is the closest thing to underwear most people get. Over that goes your tunic or kirtle, cinched at the waist with a belt, or, for the ambitious, a tightly wound cloth girdle. For women, there might be an extra layer, a supportive underdress, or fitted bodice, the medieval ancestor of the corset. Add an apron, a cloak, and, if you're headed outdoors, a second or third tunic. Now you're ready to seize the day, or at least survive the next draft. Fashion wasn't just about looking presentable. It was about declaring your place in society. The tighter and more elaborate your get-up, the more important you were, or, at least, the more time you had to spend squirming in public. Nobles wore form-fitting garments, sometimes with whalebone or wooden stays to keep everything in place. Laces and ties were pulled tight, creating the illusion of a trim figure and the reality of a medieval pressure cooker. Now, for the modern listener, imagine layering 2 pairs of wool leggings under your jeans, then belting your shirt so tightly you can't quite take a full breath. Throw on a floor-length coat, a hat, and, for fun, a belt pouch containing a week's worth of stale bread. Try bending at the waist. Try running for the bus. Now try sitting on a chamber pot and waiting for the magic to happen. Congratulations, you've just recreated the authentic medieval digestive challenge experience. For the fashion-forward elite, there was always the allure of the corset. Early versions weren't quite the wasp-waisted nightmares of later centuries, but they did the trick: firm support, rigid posture, and absolutely nowhere for breakfast to go. Girdles and stays were tied with impressive enthusiasm, pushing, pulling, and squishing everything into a vaguely respectable shape. Women could barely move, let alone breathe, let alone consider the possibility of a spontaneous trip to the public latrine. Peasants, of course, had it easier if you consider scratchy, shapeless, and eternally damp wool to be a blessing. Their tunics were simpler but just as thick, especially in winter. The downside? Every layer added pressure, every belt squeezed a little tighter, and the combination of cold, constriction, and a diet made mostly of bread meant your digestive system was in open revolt. There was little sympathy for the afflicted. Medieval advice books might recommend looser clothing for digestive stagnation, but then turn around and insist that a proper lady never appeared in public without her stays. Meanwhile, the church preached modesty, which usually meant even more layers. Fashion trends, medical advice, and religious rules all worked together to ensure you were never quite comfortable and your bowels never quite free. So, as you listen from the comfort of your stretchy pajamas and elastic waistband, spare a thought for your ancestors. Their fashion was daring, their posture impeccable, and their intestines permanently squashed by layers of social expectation and medieval Spanx. In the end, medieval style was a matter of squeezing into the moment and then squeezing a little more just to be safe. Your wardrobe didn't just shape your silhouette, it shaped your whole medieval experience, inside and out. Maybe hard labor in the fields will help. Spoiler. It just makes you sweaty, tired, and still impossibly blocked. You'd think that with all the walking, lifting, hoeing, and general peasant-level exertion, your medieval digestive system would be running like a well-oiled millstone. Modern wisdom tells you, just exercise more. Take a walk, they say. Get your steps in, they say. But in the Middle Ages, you get all the steps, tens of thousands a day, whether you want them or not, and still, your insides remain on strike. Your day starts before sunrise, in a haze of wool and ambition. You shuffle out of the house, feet bare or clad in shoes so thin they may as well be socks. The air is brisk, the ground is damp, and every step squelches with the memory of last night's rain. Your muscles complain, but there's no time to stretch. The field awaits, and the only thing more punishing than a medieval workload is being late to it. The walk itself is an adventure. There's no scenic route, just a muddy track, possibly haunted by a surly goose, and definitely decorated with surprises left by wandering livestock. You trudge past your neighbours, all similarly bundled and all wearing the same face. A blend of sleep deprivation, resignation, and the faint, desperate hope that today's breakfast might finally inspire something. Spoiler: it won't. You arrive at the field, armed with a wooden hoe or a battered rake, and begin the slow dance of medieval agriculture. It's a full-body workout, and then some. You dig, you bend, you haul, you sweat. If exercise were the key to regularity, your bowels would be giving TED Talks. But the medieval diet is relentless, and your internal pipes are more fortress wall than open channel. There are no breaks for snacks, yoga stretches, or a refreshing beverage. Water is unreliable, and ale just adds to your sense of heaviness. By midday, your back is sore, your arms are trembling, and your stomach feels like it's storing the world's most uncooperative rock. At some point, someone jokes that the only thing moving today is the wheelbarrow. Everyone laughs, because laughter is the last line of defense against reality. The work is endless. Tilling, planting, weeding, harvesting, carting loads to and from the village. Even children help out, running back and forth with baskets of weeds, as if sheer momentum might trick their digestive systems into joining in. You try squatting behind a hedge, maybe the privacy will help, but you're interrupted by a passing goose, an inquisitive child, or the urgent toll of the church bell. You trudge back to work, bowels and pride, both unimpressed. Occasionally, you hear legends of city folk who don't work the fields. Maybe they walk to the market, or pace nervously on their shop floor. You wonder if they have it better, or if their lives are just as constricted, only with more stone and fewer cows. Exercise, you realize, is universal and unrelenting, but its effects on the human gut remain one of history's great disappointments. When evening comes, you drag yourself home, body aching, mind foggy, and still, somehow, blocked. Dinner is another round of pottage and bread, chased by a hopeful mug of weak ale. You hope, as you do every night, that maybe tomorrow's labour will be the one to finally break the medieval curse. The truth is, in a world built on hard work and constant movement, your greatest accomplishment is surviving the day. Your muscles are strong, your hands are calloused, and your bowels still as stubborn as a mule. Maybe next season, maybe next century. So stretch out, listen to the quiet, and be grateful for the wonders of modern plumbing and probiotics. Medieval exercise may have built character, but it sure didn't move mountains or anything else. With half your teeth gone by age, 30, even if you did find an apple, good luck chewing it. In the Middle Ages, dental health was more wishful thinking than science. If you grew up picturing peasants gnawing on crunchy apples and hearty carrots, prepare for disappointment and a crash course in medieval oral tragedy. Your average medieval mouth is a battlefield, gums receding, enamel chipped, and teeth waving the white flag before you've even hit what we'd call midlife. Start with the basics. Brushing your teeth isn't really a thing. Sure, there are twigs, bits of cloth, or the occasional rinse with wine, vinegar, or whatever was left from last night's dubious bathwater. But oral hygiene as a concept is a few centuries away from its grand debut. Toothpaste, floss, dental appointments, those are all in the distant, sparkling future. For now, you're lucky if you remember to swish and spit. Now let's consider the medieval diet. Hard, gritty bread made from stone, ground flour, sometimes literally because millstones shed grit into the dough, pottage that's occasionally more sand than soup, and the ever-present absence of fresh vegetables or fruit. Each meal is an exercise in abrasion, wearing down teeth faster than you can say root canal. You'll probably get some fibre from all that mystery grit, but your digestive system and your smile pay the price. But the real villain is sugar, or, more precisely, its absence and then, suddenly, its arrival. Early medieval diets are blissfully low sugar, but as trade grows, sugar makes its way into noble households as the ultimate status symbol. What happens next? A dental disaster. Blackened, crumbling teeth become all the rage among the rich. Meanwhile, peasants remain grimly toothless. Not from sweet indulgence, but from a lifetime of chewing on misery. Let's say you do manage to keep a few teeth into adulthood. The ones that survive are likely misshapen, ground down to sad nubs, or quietly rotting away. Toothache is an ever-present companion, dull, throbbing, and occasionally excruciating. If you've ever wondered why medieval folks aren't smiling in portraits, it's because they're either in pain, missing too many teeth, or both. And what happens when a tooth finally gives up the ghost? Enter the local barber surgeon, whose qualifications include willingness to try and owning a pair of sturdy pliers. An extraction is a public affair. No anesthesia, no numbing gel, just a strong hand and a short prayer. You bite down on a stick, if you can, squeeze someone's arm, and hope for a clean pull. Infection is common, sepsis is a looming threat, and yet, with no antibiotics, your options are limited to hope and more wine. With your dental situation rapidly deteriorating, even the rare treat, a raw turnip, a wild apple, maybe a pilfered nut, is more of a curse than a blessing. Chewing is slow, noisy, and sometimes dangerous. Most food is boiled or mashed, turning every meal into a kind of edible baby food. If you can't chew, you swallow in chunks and let your beleaguered digestive tract handle the rest, slowly, painfully, and usually not very efficiently. Social life doesn't help. Bad breath is the medieval default, and close quarters mean there's no escaping it. Kissing is less a romantic gesture and more a test of willpower. Your breath is somewhere between old ale and forgotten cheese. And yet, people press on, sharing meals, swapping stories, and occasionally swapping teeth if rumors of tooth transplants are to be believed. Smiles may be gap-toothed and hesitant, but they're still genuine, proof that medieval life, for all its hardships, was endured with a kind of grim, toothless hope. So next time you bite into something crisp, or flash your pearly whites in the mirror, remember, in the Middle Ages, every tooth was a minor miracle, and every apple a leap of faith. If nothing else works, blame a witch, or a neighbour, or the phases of the moon. Welcome to medieval Europe, where medical knowledge ends and wild speculation takes over. It's a world where every hiccup, headache, or stubborn case of constipation might be traced back not to your diet, but to your enemies, or perhaps to the night sky. Your gut, it turns out, is just as vulnerable to curses as to cabbage. When you haven't gone in days, and the local herbalist's teas have failed, suspicion turns to the supernatural. Villagers start to mutter. Was it something you ate? Or was it something, or someone, casting a little shade on your well-being? Maybe you crossed old Agnes at the well last Thursday. Maybe you forgot to leave a coin for the fairies. Or maybe, just maybe, Mercury is in retrograde again, and your bowels are feeling the celestial chaos. Blaming witches is always a crowd favourite. After all, if you can't fix the problem, you might as well find someone to take the heat. Did your neighbour's sheep look at you funny? Did the village cat yawn 3 times while facing east? Congratulations, you've just uncovered the source of your misery. A few harsh whispers, a pointed finger, and suddenly the unfortunate target is getting a lot of side-eye and possibly fewer invitations to share pottage. The moon, too, is a prime suspect. Everyone knows its phases control tides, moods, and, by medieval logic, internal plumbing. A new moon? Your insides are in lockdown. A full moon? Beware the nocturnal urges. If your gut refuses to budge, just wait until the right lunar phase, and everything will be back on schedule, or so you hope. Then there are the curses, intentional or accidental. The wrong glance, the wrong word, or a bit of envy at the market can all result in a mysterious blockage. The village wise woman is always happy to sell you a charm, a knotted string, a blessed pebble, or a tiny pouch filled with herbs. You wear it under your tunic, close to the trouble spot, and wait for the magic to happen. If it works, the charm gets the credit. If it doesn't, well, maybe the curse is just extra stubborn this time. Every household has their own rituals for fending off digestive demons. Some families insist on knocking 3 times on the table before meals. Others hang a sprig of rue above the door, or sprinkle salt in the corners of the room. If things get desperate, you might find yourself reciting a rhyme backward at midnight while hopping on one foot. Is it effective? Let's just say the line between medicine and improv theatre is razor thin. Superstitions can even shape your diet. Garlic is eaten not just for flavour, but to ward off evil spirits and nosy neighbours. Onions are considered protective, provided you hang them in bunches and never let them touch the ground. Bread baked on a Friday is said to have extra magical properties, especially if you mark it with a cross before baking. Eat it warm, and you might just break the spell. And let's not forget the occasional animal scapegoat. The family rooster, the barn cat, or the wandering toad might be blamed for your distress, especially if they seem to thrive while you suffer. The medieval countryside is a tapestry of hope, suspicion, and creative blame. When all else fails, you resign yourself to fate. Sometimes, the digestive demons win. Other times, they move on to someone else, often just in time for you to enjoy a rare moment of relief. So, if you're listening to this, tucked up with your probiotic smoothie and peppermint tea, thank your lucky stars, and maybe your local pharmacist, that you live in a world where curses aren't on the list of possible causes for your next stomachache. In medieval times, relief was a matter of faith, fear, and a little bit of finger-pointing. Travelling medieval style means holding it for days while bouncing in a cart. Rest stops? Try the nearest hedge. There's nothing quite like the medieval road trip. Instead of a car with heated seats and podcasts, you've got a rickety wooden cart, creaking along at the speed of a determined snail. The highway is more like a muddy trail, half swamp, half obstacle course, and the ride is so bumpy your teeth are rattling, and that's if you still have any left. Your luggage is a bundle of bread, a slightly mouldy cheese, and the distant hope that nothing falls off the cart and rolls away into history. But the real adventure isn't just the journey. It's the challenge of travelling with a digestive system that's already notoriously uncooperative. If you're prone to constipation, congratulations, medieval travel is basically an endurance sport. Every bump in the road reminds you of the 5-day standoff happening in your gut. You cling to the side of the cart and pray for movement, but all you get is more dust and another new bruise. Need to go along the way? Good luck. There are no roadside inns with gleaming bathrooms or charming gas stations with endless supplies of toilet paper. Your options are limited to behind that tree, behind that slightly larger bush, or just keep going and pretend you're above such needs. Every hedgerow is a potential rest stop, but every hedgerow is also full of hazards: thorns, nettles, the neighbour's goats, and at least 3 kinds of stinging insects. Privacy is a distant dream. Anyone walking by will pretend not to notice, but they'll absolutely remember and gossip about it over ale later. If you're lucky enough to travel in a group, the whole process becomes a kind of team-building exercise in mutual embarrassment. Someone stands guard, someone else complains loudly. The bravest soul ventures off the path, only to return with an expression that says, "I survived, but at what cost?" In a world where everyone is chronically blocked, the rare traveller who suddenly finds relief becomes a legend, a topic of fireside discussion, and possibly a new folk hero. And if you're travelling by foot, it's not much better. The constant walking might get your heart rate up, but it's unlikely to convince your medieval diet to cooperate. Every step is a reminder of yesterday's bread, last week's cheese, and the endless promise of pottage. You eye every copse of trees with hope and dread, never sure if this will be the stop that finally breaks the curse or just adds another story to your long list of travel miseries. For the nobility, travel might involve a litter or a fancy carriage, but don't be fooled. The only real difference is that you're constipated in style. Royalty and their retinues still face the same issues: no bathrooms, no privacy, and too many layers of clothing. There might be a servant with a chamber pot, but using it in a moving carriage is an act of both skill and desperation. One false move, and your dignity is left in a ditch somewhere outside Canterbury. The end of the day brings no relief. Medieval inns are crowded, noisy, and only slightly more private than the village green. The latrine is likely a shared pit out back, and the line is long, filled with travellers all nursing the same dream. Just one quiet moment and maybe, if the stars align, a hint of regularity. So you lie awake, wrapped in a scratchy blanket, listening to the snores, the creaking floorboards, and the distant hoot of an owl. You vow never to travel again. Tomorrow will be easier, you tell yourself. Tomorrow, you might find a rest stop without thorns. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll finally go. In medieval travel, patience isn't just a virtue, it's a survival strategy. And your gut is along for the whole bumpy ride. Royalty weren't spared. Sometimes the most opulent castle in Europe is just a glorified chamber pot with better acoustics. You might imagine that being king or queen comes with certain perks: jewel, encrusted crowns, banquets groaning with meat, and servants who leap at your every command. But there's one great equalizer in the Middle Ages: constipation. No amount of velvet, gold, or heraldic banners can grant your royal bowels a free pass. When nature refuses to call, not even absolute power can open the door. Castles, for all their grandeur, were not designed with comfort in mind. Take a tour of any great hall, and you'll find the medieval answer to plumbing is the garderobe, a drafty, echoing stone closet perched over a pit, moat, or sometimes just the hillside below. Sure, there are tapestries on the walls and minstrels in the corridor, but step into the royal privy, and it's just you, a chilly breeze, and the haunting awareness that the last 5 kings probably sat right here, also hoping for a miracle. The garderobe offers none of the luxuries you'd expect. The stone is freezing, the seat is unforgiving, and the whole is, well, let's just say you're grateful for long robes to keep your dignity intact. Even worse, the garderobe is often located far from your bedchamber, a deliberate move to keep unpleasant odours at bay, but a nightmare when urgency finally strikes. In the middle of a cold winter night, you might contemplate abdicating in favour of whoever invented the indoor flush. Royalty, of course, could summon help. Enter the groom of the stool, a trusted servant whose job is exactly what it sounds like, helping the monarch manage the daily business of digestion. The groom keeps the chamber pot polished, fetches hot water, and stands by with a reassuring silence and, one hopes, a strong stomach. He is one of the most trusted and least envied members of the royal household. Gossip at court often includes speculation on how the king's day went, and a monarch's regularity can quickly become a matter of state interest. If the king is irritable, the entire court braces itself. Then there's the royal diet, rich, heavy, and perilously low on anything that encourages movement. Spit-roasted meats, sweetmeats, cheese, pies, and endless rounds of white bread make for impressive feasts but disastrous digestion. Fruit and vegetables are mostly afterthoughts, reserved for decoration or the pet rabbits. The royal physician in a panic prescribes honeyed figs, a cup of warm posset, or even an imported prune, hoping to nudge things along without causing a scandal. But medical help in the castle is a roll of the dice. The royal apothecary's cabinet is filled with dried herbs, odd powders, and bottled hope. One wrong dose, and you go from stubbornly blocked to suddenly legendary. Sometimes, desperate measures are taken: hot poultices, special prayers, a midnight walk along the battlements to encourage the humours. If all else fails, the queen might send for a holy relic, an ancient bone or a drop of miracle water, to inspire the necessary miracle. Behind closed doors, royal suffering is universal. Constipation spares no one. Kings, queens, dukes, and duchesses all share the same fate, waiting, wishing, and wondering if tomorrow will be the day everything returns to normal. No bard ever sang of a monarch's digestive success, but you can bet every ruler had their own quiet victory dance when the chamber pot finally delivered good news. So next time you picture medieval royalty lounging in their splendour, remember, the struggle is timeless. Even in a castle, Sometimes the most powerful seat is still the one above the garderobe, and even kings must answer, eventually, to the laws of nature. You did it. After days of suspense, something finally moves. It's a medieval miracle. The choir sings. The heavens open. There are moments in history that are so profound, so unexpectedly glorious, that chroniclers feel compelled to write them down. The day a siege ended, the day a king was crowned, and, for you, the day your long-suffering, embattled medieval digestive system finally, mercifully, comes to life. You're not sure if it was the prayer, the beans, the walk to the field, or the threat of another visit from the barber surgeon with his tray of leeches, but the impossible has happened. The Middle Ages have gifted you a genuine moment of relief. You feel it first as a strange, hopeful sensation, a gentle grumble, a faint stirring, like distant thunder on a clear morning. You don't want to get your hopes up. You've been disappointed before. But as the minutes pass, the feeling grows. You try to look nonchalant, continuing with your chores, but your mind is racing, and your family senses something is different. Aunt Edwina gives you a knowing nod. Even the dog seems to be rooting for you. Now comes the critical question. Where will you make history? The chamber pot sits ominously in the corner, but so does the well-trodden path to the garden. If you're feeling bold, perhaps the hedge beyond the goat pen is calling your name. Wherever you choose, there's no time to waste. Your walk is brisk, determined, almost triumphant, a hero's journey in slippers. As you settle in for your moment of destiny, time seems to stand still. You remember every medieval superstition, every saint's name, every herbal tea and ill-advised physic you've endured. This is your personal Battle of Hastings, your own Magna Carta. Finally, success. The world is new again. The sensation is so overwhelming that you almost expect an actual choir to appear, belting out a Te Deum in full polyphony. The sunlight streams in at a suspiciously perfect angle. The chickens pause in their endless pecking, and for one brief, golden moment, all is right with the world. If the town crier could read your thoughts, he'd be announcing your achievement at the market square. You return to the house lighter, physically, emotionally, and perhaps even spiritually. Your gait has changed. Your face glows with the quiet satisfaction of someone who has seen the darkness and come out the other side. You meet your family's eyes, and there's a silent understanding. No one says anything, but everyone knows. Even the neighbor's cat seems less judgmental. In the rare event that you have access to parchment and ink, you consider recording the event for posterity. On this, the 4th day of Lent, I was delivered. Perhaps your descendants will sing ballads of your struggle and triumph. Or, more likely, they'll simply be grateful for whatever dietary miracle awaits in the centuries to come. Of course, your medieval world is nothing if not practical. There's no time for parades or laurel wreaths. There are fields to hoe, bread to bake, and another round of pottage bubbling on the fire. Life moves on, with its usual blend of discomfort and hope, but for today, you move too. This, after all, is the real miracle of medieval life. Amidst the endless drudgery, the superstitions, the public latrines and private embarrassments, there are moments of pure, undiluted victory. The simplest triumphs are often the sweetest, especially when they're so hard won. So tonight, as you rest, take pride in your accomplishment. The choir may not be real, but the relief certainly is. In the storybook of your medieval life, this is the happy ending you never knew you needed, until you finally, blessedly, got it. There's no soap, there's no running water, and now you're already dreading the next time. You did it, you accomplished what felt impossible, surviving the most epic trial medieval life could throw at you. But before you can bask in your victory, reality sets in. The aftermath is always a letdown. In modern times, the ritual is straightforward. Flush, soap, rinse, and move on with your day feeling fresh and triumphant. In the Middle Ages, cleaning up is more a suggestion than a guarantee. Your first obstacle is water, or more specifically, its absence. In your little thatched cottage or castle chamber, running water is a concept as foreign as indoor heating or dental insurance. If you want water, you have to fetch it yourself, one heavy wooden bucket at a time, from a stream or communal well. And you're not the first to use that well today. You're probably not even the 10th. By noon, that bucket's contents might be more pond than pristine. Next up, soap. Sure, you've heard of it, and on special occasions you may even have seen it. A lumpy, harsh block that's mostly lard, ashes, and optimism. It's not the gentle, lavender-scented luxury of your modern bathroom. Medieval soap is more abrasive than cleansing, a gritty cube that leaves your hands red and your spirit a little wounded. It's used sparingly, hoarded for actual emergencies like festival days or when the bishop comes to visit. Most of the time, you simply make do. Maybe a quick rinse in cold water, if any is left. Maybe a brisk rub with a handful of grass. If it's summer and the sheep haven't beaten you to it, you consider wiping your hands on your tunic. But after a lifetime of using the same patch of fabric for everything from cleaning tools to wiping noses, even your tunic is starting to beg for mercy. For the truly unlucky, the aftermath includes a visit from the local pest population. Flies swarm to the chamber pot the moment you lift the lid. Mice investigate with the curiosity of seasoned veterans. You're left swatting, shooing, and pondering the meaning of hygiene as your accomplishment slowly fades. Of course, there's the social aftermath too. You glance around, remembering you're sharing your living space with at least 5 relatives, 2 goats, and a dog. Privacy is a luxury, but so is the chance to wash your hands without an audience. You try to act casual, but everyone knows what you've just done. There's no hiding the sense of relief on your face, or, for that matter, the aroma lingering in the air. Meanwhile, you're already dreading the next time. Will you have to battle the chamber pot again? Or risk the flies and thorns of the garden hedge? Will you get lucky and find the moss soft, the straw dry, or the linen square miraculously unclaimed? Every option is a gamble, and every return trip is just another round in history's most awkward cycle. It's at this point that you start to appreciate the little things: rain to fill the barrel, a bar of soap for your birthday, a neighbour who doesn't dump their pot too close to your front door. You even begin to envy the future, that distant world of flush toilets, gentle foaming soaps, and private stalls with working locks. But for now, you take a deep breath, carefully, gather your courage, and head back to daily life. There's always more to do: fields to till, bread to bake, a pot of pottage that's definitely not going to stir itself. The small victories are all you have. So, as you wipe your hands on a patch of grass and glance up at the sky, you make a quiet promise to appreciate every little modern comfort when you get back, because in the Middle Ages, clean hands and peace of mind are as rare as a miracle and almost as precious. In every village, there's an herbalist with a pouch full of dried leaves and confidence. They'll swear by their digestive teas, which taste like boiled socks and do little more than colour your water a suspicious shade of green. You choke down a mug and wait, and wait, and wait. The medieval herbalist is both healer and hope merchant, roaming the edges of the village with a basket of weeds and a reputation for mystery. Everyone knows her. She's the one muttering to her garden, drying bundles of plants from every rafter, and confidently diagnosing your every complaint as blocked humours. She's got a tonic for everything: sleeplessness, heartbreak, haunted chickens, and of course, stubborn bowels. But despite her encyclopedic knowledge of all things leafy, your digestive woes are not so easily conquered. Your journey begins with a visit to her cottage, where the air is thick with the smells of sage, thyme, and the lingering memory of last winter's failed experiment. She welcomes you with a knowing nod, already reaching for her biggest teapot and a handful of dried whatever that was. There's talk of ancient recipes, secret combinations, and a wild look in her eye that suggests she once tried her own brew and has never been the same. The first cup is always the worst. You sip, trying not to grimace. The The taste is somewhere between mossy puddle and very old carrot. Maybe there's a hint of mint. Or maybe that's just wishful thinking. You swallow and wait for the magic. She assures you, by moonrise, you'll be as light as air. You smile politely, but you know the truth. By moonrise, you'll be right back where you started. The teas are endless. Fennel for the wind, nettle for the stubborn, dandelion for the hopeful, and dock leaf for those who have truly lost their way. If your bowels are extra rebellious, she brings out the special blend, a concoction so pungent it could clear a tavern in under a minute. Still, you drink, because hope springs eternal, especially when the alternative is another day of medieval suspense. Sometimes there are poultices and compresses too. She'll mix up a muddy paste of herbs, slap it on your stomach, and instruct you to lie quietly and think of movement. You oblige, eyes shut, wondering if she's onto something, or just giving your body an excuse to nap. Either way, the effect is the same, nothing. Unless you count the rash from the nettles, which gives you something new to scratch while you wait. Her advice is as creative as her cures. Try eating more garlic. Sleep with a sprig of rosemary under your pillow. Tie a blue ribbon around your waist and walk backward around the well 3 times. You try everything, because at this point, you'll believe anything. Hope in the Middle Ages comes not from certainty, but from the sheer number of options. And yet, you keep coming back. There's a certain comfort in the ritual, the boiling kettle, the swirling leaves, the herbalist's steady confidence. Even as your stomach remains unmoved, your spirit feels a little lighter, buoyed by the sense that at least you're doing something. Plus, the herbalist's tales are endlessly entertaining. She'll regale you with stories of that one villager who once went 3 weeks without relief, only to be cured by a particularly loud thunderstorm. Ultimately, the herbalist's remedies rarely solve the problem, but they do provide companionship, a dash of hope, and the soothing illusion of progress. In a world with no real medicine, that's often the best you can ask for. So you finish your latest cup of greenish optimism, thank her with a smile, and make your slow way home. You're not any closer to relief, but you're comforted by the knowledge that, in medieval times, sometimes a little hope and a lot of hot water are their own form of medicine. Whenever a mysterious illness sweeps through, everyone blames bad air or maybe last week's unlucky bowel movement. Because in medieval logic, if you haven't gone, something evil is brewing, possibly inside your own intestines. It's the 14th century, and rumours spread faster than the plague itself. One villager coughs, and suddenly half the town is debating whether it's the breath of a demon, the result of eating that suspicious sausage, or, most sinister of all, a case of terminal constipation. Medieval medicine is a game of connecting invisible dots. If you're feeling ill, it's because something, somewhere, has stopped moving. As a result, every illness becomes a referendum on regularity. The village-wise woman starts asking pointed questions. Have you been lately? She's not talking about the market. The local priest includes digestive health in his prayers, just to be safe. Even your neighbour, who hasn't washed his tunic since the last solar eclipse, offers unsolicited advice. You need to eat more leeks. Trust me. No one trusts him, but the advice keeps coming. The paranoia gets creative. Every ache, every fever, every mysterious rash. Someone, somewhere, links it back to the last time someone couldn't go. People swap stories of the blocked baker who broke the town bread supply with his misfortune, or the constipated knight whose entire battalion fell ill right after he spent a week scowling at his breakfast. The lesson? Your colon isn't just your business, it's everyone's business. Enter the local doctor, striding through the panic with a look of deep, slightly confused wisdom. He sniffs the air, shakes his head, and mutters about miasma, bad air, the ultimate scapegoat for every disaster. But even he admits that if things aren't moving inside you, you might be generating your own personal cloud of doom. He prescribes walking backward at dawn, a mug of hot ale, and maybe, if you're truly desperate, a week's supply of his most dubious laxative. Of course, The blame game doesn't stop with bad air. Medieval people are endlessly creative at finding culprits. Did you sleep with your feet facing north? Did you skip the special prayer before supper? Did you step over a black cat while carrying a turnip? Any one of these could doom you, and possibly the entire village, to a season of mysterious stomach aches. The panic is contagious, and before long everyone is on edge, sneaking sideways glances at anyone who looks a little too uncomfortable on the bench. During times of plague, this paranoia reaches its peak. If someone falls ill, neighbors quickly scan their recent history for any irregularities. Woe betide the soul who admits to a 5-day dry spell. Suddenly, you're the focus of the town's suspicion. Did your sluggish bowels bring doom to the whole parish? The midwife might suggest burning your bedding, the priest calls for extra confessions, and the herbalist arrives with enough fennel tea to float a boat. Hygiene practices take on a superstitious twist. People clutch sprigs of rosemary and sage to ward off evil winds and hang garlic around their necks, just in case the true enemy is closer than they thought. Washing hands? Only if you can spare the water, and even then, it's mostly symbolic. But everyone knows, deep down, that prevention starts in the chamber pot. As the panic ebbs and the illness passes, the village collectively breathes a sigh of relief, sometimes literally. The survivors swap stories, vow to eat more beans, and double down on herbal teas, just in case. And while medical progress won't arrive for a few more centuries, one thing is clear. In the Middle Ages, if you wanted to stay healthy, you needed to keep things moving, or else risk becoming the next cautionary tale. So the next time you hear a mysterious cough, remember, medieval health is 90% paranoia, 10% pottage, and always about your last successful trip to the privy. Lent, fasting, and random surprise famines mean that sometimes the only thing moving through your body is prayer. Everyone's cleansing by default, and nobody is thrilled about it. Forget juice cleanses and detox diets. Medieval Europe had the original, unintentional cleanse, and it was a lot less glamorous than anything you'll find on Instagram. The church calendar is stuffed with mandatory fasting periods. Lent, Advent, Ember Days, Fridays, and an entire grab bag of Saints' Eves. Fasting was less about spiritual enlightenment and more about sheer survival. You go to bed hungry, wake up hungrier, and spend your days thinking longingly about pottage that isn't just warm water. Let's start with Lent, the 40-day stretch of enforced minimalism. Meat, forbidden. Dairy, also forbidden unless you're a particularly creative monk with a lax abbot. Eggs are out, and on the strictest days, even olive oil is considered suspicious. For the average peasant, this means eating an even duller diet than usual: thin stews, dried peas, and whatever sprouted from the root cellar during the long winter. If you're feeling fancy, you might have pickled herring, proof that fasting is a form of penance in more ways than one. But the real fun begins with surprise famine, that unwelcome guest who never RSVPs. It's spring, but the new harvest is weeks away, and last year's stores are nothing but dust and hope. Meals shrink from meager to memory of a meal, and suddenly, everyone's fasting whether they want to or not. People get creative, boiling weeds, roasting acorns, and scraping the bottom of the pottage pot for anything that isn't actually part of the pot itself. On the upside, all this accidental fasting does get things moving, eventually. There's only so much your digestive tract can do with a diet of wilted greens and watery broth. After weeks of stubborn silence, your system shifts gears, often at the least convenient moment. Of course, the sense of cleansing isn't the blissful feeling promised by modern wellness gurus. Instead, it's more like a medieval alarm clock, sudden, loud, and impossible to ignore. And there's never any toilet paper. Nobody is thrilled about the process. Fasting is supposed to be a time for spiritual reflection, but most people spend their days fantasizing about bread, cheese, and roast anything. In the towns, the church bells ring to remind you it's another fast day, as if your stomach needs a reminder. Even the nobility, who theoretically have more food stored, suffer through the season with longer, duller banquets. The priests encourage you to offer up your hunger as a pious sacrifice, but after a few days of nothing but weak vegetable water, you start to question just how holy a rumbling stomach really is. Fasting etiquette is full of loopholes and workarounds. Monks in Northern Europe invented almond milk to get around the dairy ban. Fish is technically allowed, leading to a medieval explosion of weird recipes. If it swims or slithers, it's suddenly a delicacy. Otters, beavers, and even barnacle geese are counted as fish for ecclesiastical purposes, a fact that still confuses everyone centuries later. But as your body adjusts to the new routine, there's a sense of grim camaraderie. Everyone is in it together, sharing scraps, swapping tips, and grumbling through another round of pious cleansing. If someone actually manages a successful trip to the privy during a fast, they become the unofficial village hero, at least until the next famine or feast day. The irony, of course, is that after weeks of praying for movement, your prayers are finally answered, and suddenly you wish you could take them back. Medieval fasting. A test of faith, endurance, and digestive resilience. Nobody is having a good time, but everyone is definitely having an experience. So, the next time you skip lunch by choice, remember your medieval ancestors. Their cleanse wasn't a lifestyle, it was survival. And for better or worse, it kept things moving eventually. On rare occasions, a merchant brings back figs, prunes, or even a rare orange. Medieval excitement runs high. So does the risk of a digestive disaster. Nobody's system is ready for fiber at these levels. Imagine the buzz when word spreads through your muddy little village. A merchant caravan is rolling in, trailing the scents of distant lands and the promise of foods no one's seen outside of illuminated manuscripts. This is no ordinary delivery of beets and barley. This time, there's talk of dried figs, wrinkled prunes, maybe even a real honest-to-goodness orange, bright as the sun and probably guarded like a holy relic. The townsfolk gather in the square, crowding around as the merchant displays his wares on a creaking wooden table. The figs glisten with a sticky sheen. The prunes look mysterious and slightly intimidating. The orange is set apart, glowing in the weak light like some ancient jewel. There's much whispering, poking, and bartering. Prices are outrageous, but for once, you don't care. This is culinary adventure, medieval style. When you finally get your hands on a fig or a prune, you savor it like a feast day. For nobles, these imports are the highlight of the banquet, served in crystal dishes, garnished with a flourish, and devoured with the excitement of people who have only read about regularity in the Bible. For peasants, it's a rare treat, split among the family, chewed slowly, eyes closed, imagining distant lands and better plumbing. What no one is prepared for is what happens next. Because when you've spent years on a diet of brown bread, cheese, and mystery pottage, your digestive system has become suspicious of anything remotely healthy. It's a cautious, slow-moving creature, set in its ways, and absolutely not ready for the high-fiber blitzkrieg of even a single prune. At first, there's only anticipation, a hopeful flutter, a sense that change is on the wind, and maybe, soon, elsewhere. Then comes the realization something is happening. Medieval chronicles are silent on many personal matters, but if you read between the lines, you'll see tales of sudden disappearances from banquets, nobles dashing from the high table, or whole families politely excusing themselves from evening prayers. The import of fiber is not just an economic matter, it's a force of nature. This moment of gastrointestinal excitement is met with mixed feelings. Some people are overjoyed, convinced they've been healed by a miracle from the East. Others panic, unaccustomed to the pace at which things are now moving. Jokes abound in the marketplace, and there's more than one sheepish face at the communal latrine. Herbalists and wise women nod knowingly. "It's the prunes," they whisper, "always the prunes." Nobles are especially vulnerable. Used to rich meats and white bread, their systems treat fiber like an invading army. The court physician is summoned, searching for a polite way to say, "Your Majesty, perhaps fewer figs next time." For peasants, the lesson is equally dramatic. That longed-for treat becomes both a blessing and a cautionary tale, passed down in family lore. Remember the time great Uncle Oswald ate 2 prunes? He was never the same. Of course, the excitement fades. The merchant caravan moves on, taking the last of the fruit and the town's dignity with it. But for days afterward, everyone remembers the relief, the alarm, the hasty walk to the nearest hedge. A single orange may not cure all ills, but it certainly creates some new stories. So next time you wander past the exotic fruit section in the grocery store, spare a thought for your medieval ancestors. For them, imported delicacies were rare, risky, and unforgettable, proof that even the best things in life come with consequences. In a world unprepared for sudden abundance, a little fruit went a very long way. Centuries of constipated ancestors have shaped the world you live in today. Maybe that's why you double-check for bran in your cereal and silently thank modern plumbing every morning. Because history is less about castles and more about who could finally go. Let's be honest. When you think about history, you picture battles, kings, and grand cathedrals. What you don't picture, what nobody puts on a tapestry, is the everyday struggle of the medieval gut. Yet for hundreds of years, the hidden drama beneath the tunic was just as formative as anything written in the chronicles. Imagine generation after generation growing up on diets of stone-hard bread, salted meat, and cheese more stubborn than a tax collector. Vegetables and fruit were rare visitors, passing through medieval kitchens like travelling minstrels, enjoyed when available, but mostly spoken of in wistful tones. The concept of fibre wouldn't arrive for centuries, and the few people who did stumble upon a good source quickly learned about the perils of overindulgence. If you think your great-grandmother was tough, just remember, she probably survived winters where the only thing moving was her shadow. These digestive battles shaped more than just daily life. They left their mark on culture, language, and even the inventions that define the modern world. Chamber pots evolved from simple clay bowls into status symbols of silver and porcelain. Communal latrines, garderobes, and cesspits became testing grounds for medieval engineering, forcing towns to invent new ways to get the bad stuff out before it reached the castle moat. Or worse, the well. Early urban planners spent more time thinking about waste than about city walls. Medieval physicians, desperate for answers, wrote volumes on the movement of the bowels. They charted the humours, mapped out astrological calendars, and debated the merits of everything from pottage to prunes. The groom of the stool, a real position in the English royal household, was responsible for managing the monarch's digestive schedule. Imagine that on a modern CV. Every medical innovation, every herbal experiment, every superstitious prayer was just another step in humanity's long march toward regularity. And, of course, it didn't stop at the chamber pot. The medieval obsession with digestion trickled down, so to speak, into superstition and law. Festivals often featured symbolic purifications. Witches were sometimes accused of cursing people with chronic blockages. In hard years, entire communities would gather for collective prayers, less for rain, more for relief. Because when the going gets tough, sometimes the most pressing miracle isn't a holy vision, but a simple, blessed trip to the privy. All of this left a legacy. The modern love affair with bran, fiber bars, and probiotic yogurt is just history repeating itself with better marketing. Your kitchen is a shrine to what medieval people lacked: fresh fruit, vegetables, and more varieties of bread than they could imagine. The fact that you even have choices in toilet paper would strike them as the height of luxury. Medieval folks would swap half their herd for a single roll of 2-ply and a working flush. The next time you stroll down a supermarket aisle, basket full of leafy greens, spare a grateful nod to your constipated ancestors. Their struggles, as unglamorous as they were, gave rise to the world you enjoy today. The drive for comfort, relief, and dignity didn't just build castles and cathedrals, it built bathrooms, sewers, and an entire industry dedicated to gut health. So when you sip your morning coffee and everything goes according to plan, thank history. Remember that behind every grand achievement, be it the Magna Carta or a peasant's thatched roof, there was someone, somewhere, desperately wishing for a miracle. In the end, history isn't just the story of who ruled, who fought, or who wrote the laws. It's the story of who, at long last, managed to finally, gloriously go. And so, as we finally stagger to the end of our medieval digestive journey, let's take a soothing moment to appreciate just how far we've come. Tonight you've survived hard bread, absent vegetables, legendary cheese, and the perpetual existential dread of the chamber pot. You've faced moss wiping, public latrines, and the haunting gaze of a medieval barber surgeon with a suspiciously eager leech. You've endured fasting, famine, and the world's slowest moving medical science, all with the dignity of someone who just desperately wants a bran muffin. Yet through it all, medieval people persevered. They got up each day, put on their scratchiest tunic, and faced the world with stubborn hope, even if that meant not facing the world's business for several days in a row. Their resilience is honestly a little inspiring, and possibly a medical marvel. So tonight, as you settle into your clean bed with central heating, soft toilet paper, and plumbing that won't betray you in the middle of the night, maybe send a quiet thank you to the millions who came before you, constipated, courageous, and somehow still hopeful. Their suffering paved the way for your daily fiber, probiotics, and that glorious little room with the lock on the door. Because history, in all its messiness and misery, shows us that people are remarkably stubborn, endlessly creative, and just a bit ridiculous. So breathe easy, relax, and let the comfort of the present wash over you like a warm bath, something else they didn't have. May your dreams be gentle, your sleep deep, and your digestive system forever regular. Good night, and remember, it's okay to let it all go.